Hey, this is Jose Galison of No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel. You can also find me on just about every podcatcher there is. I'm not in the Liberty Movement YouTube and BitChute anymore. I did a little announcement on that, what's going on. So if you're interested in that, go check out my little video. It's like a little 5-6 minute video on announcement for the Liberty Movement and explain what's going on there. Today my guest is Tommy Salmon from Year Zero. He's a dude on the Libertarian Institute. The topic today is, the fourth industrial revolution, Agenda 2030, Build Back Better, all that stuff. We all know with this past year, that's the thing. I'm gonna go ahead and bring him on, and we'll get at. As always, give me money. Patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. I'm all about getting money. I do want to give a big thank you to my patrons because I'm getting to the point where I technically make money off this. I'm technically professional now. I make like $5 a month. So hey, it's something. And that's not to put it down. I very much appreciate it, and it's keeping me going. Because if I'm going to lose money, what's the point of doing it? I'm not trying to get rich or anything, but I'm also not trying to lose money. It's really hard to justify the old lady when I'm losing money doing this shit. So I definitely appreciate it. For all you patrons, though, as I always say, if you guys have any creative input, whether you want to come on the show or whatever, hit me up. Also, another perk, episodes get released a week early. If there's anything else you guys want, let me know. I highly encourage y'all to do that. I'm going to go ahead and bring on Tommy, and we'll get going with this. What's up, dude?
What's going on, man?
Hey. So you want to go ahead and give a little intro for yourself to the audience for anyone who doesn't know you?
Yeah. I'm the host of Year Zero. I'm a trashy fucking truck driver that just runs around and has nothing to do other than listen to audiobooks and podcasts, and decided to start my own shit and talk for myself.
Those are some of the smartest people in the world. I thought it was funny. I shared something on Twitter not too long ago, and it was just a thought I was having about the whole Rogan thing and how everyone's freaking out about Rogan with the whole vaccine thing. And it's like, this dude's life is centered around health, and it's like everyone trashes him like he's not a doctor. And it's like, I'd be willing to put strong money on the topic of health. He probably knows more than the majority of doctors. Maybe not in their specific forte for each doctor here and there, but for general health, fitness, taking care of yourself, that's his thing. So people put that down. And there's a lot of people I learned the vast majority of my knowledge from commutes. I have an hour commute to work, and a lot of audiobooks, podcasts. And then from there I started actually reading, and here we are. Not to say I'm a genius, but I ain't too bad. I feel like your average libertarian is probably better than most economists. So, yeah.
Well, the thing about truck drivers, you're going to run into about, I don't know, probably about 85% of them that only want to talk trucking. That's all they ever fucking want to talk about, and it gets old. I very few truck drivers I will actually sit down and have a conversation with, but the ones that are curious, they spend all their time listening or reading or figuring shit out. I've met guys that speak 5 languages that are truck drivers. One of my best friends, Gordon McGill, extremely smart guy. I've had him on the podcast a couple of times, and he's just an extremely smart guy. And he's been driving since he was 16 years old. His dad was a driver. His grandpa was a driver. That's all he's ever wanted to do. He's been to New Zealand, Canada, all over the place driving truck.
Yeah, no, that's definitely there's something there for sure. I feel like a lot of people put down your common working man, but sometimes just having an interest in something will get you a lot further than just being someone who went to school or whatever. Today, like I said, I had brought you on to talk about some conspiracy shit, and then I also wanted to, this was kind of brought on from, this is a thing I've been focused on a lot lately, sort of. I've been focused more on solutions, but I listened to the episode where you were on with Pete, and figured it'd be interested to talk. I know that was a little bit more doom and gloom, that episode, but I kind of wanted to, we'll probably spend about half the episode talking on that, kind of a refresher. I know you just got done recording with Richard Grove today, so I'm sure you have more to say on the matter. But then I kind of want to cap it off at the end with kind of our thoughts on possible solutions. Kind of want to do a little Boog talk because I had a big thing on Twitter today with some people that were freaking out because I said the Boog was big dumb. So and they got all butthurt about that. So we can kind of go.
I love Magnus. Magnus is my dude. I've had him on the show. I love him to death. Like, he's a great dude. I understand what he's doing. I can't say that I think that everything he's doing is appropriate, but
yeah, I mean, I think Boog is one of those things that it has its place, and it is funny, and it is like, but if you really deeply think about it, it's not a good prescription for helping things. We can get into that. I want to start out with defining kind of like the fourth industrial revolution, kind of. So I'll let you roll because this is your place right here. You got the receipts.
yeah. Okay. So when you're reading, the book that I'm really focused on is the book Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that's really, you can read the Fourth Industrial Revolution but when you get into Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, they kind of give you an outline of what they mean by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So what they're saying is that the invention of the combustion engine, the cotton gin, that was the first first industrial revolution, excuse me. Then the second would be the light bulb. Third would be your mobile phones, computer technology, the internet, that type of stuff. The fourth industrial revolution is referencing transhumanism, AI, that type of shit. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to centralize blockchain technologies. They're trying to ensure microchip technologies to where every human is merged with technology in a transhuman future.
All right, cool. Yeah, that is, I mean, that is the fourth industrial revolution for sure. I also kind of want to go into the Agenda 2030 and all that, the Build Back Better and all that stuff. Kind of, I know they kind of all tie together and they kind of vaguely get meshed together because, I mean, I forget what the group is that's throwing all this shit out. I'm sure you can tell me. Do you remember the group?
Yeah, it's the World Economic Forum.
There you go.
Yeah.
I don't know why I couldn't think of it. But yeah, they have, there's basically, it's like a mash of a bunch of different things and they all just kind of get floated out in the ether. It's almost like they're throwing things at a board and seeing what sticks. So like Agenda 2030 is the other one, which will kind of play into what we'll talk about later. The Agenda 2030. I don't know if you want to give a rundown of that. I mean, you know what that is, right? I know what that is too, but I'm sure you do as well, right?
I've read into it. I haven't really looked at it that hard, not near as much as I've looked at the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. That's kind of what I've been focused on is the technocratic movement, which I'm sure Agenda 2030 you could fit into it. The Agenda 2030 was created by the UN, though. That was kind of their idea of how they were going to mold the future for countries going forward. I really think what we're looking at right now is beyond that. I think what we're looking at is corporations, and it ties back to the Rhodes Scholarship, Cecil Rhodes, wanting to really control the flow of information, control the way that the countries move forward. And we see it every day. I mean, libertarians are famous for ranting against this stuff. You got like the Federal Reserve. That's a public-private partnership where the private entity is distributing the wealth. They are printing the money, they're creating the money, and they're distributing the wealth to the public partnership. So what I'm looking at here is, I can see your point with the Agenda 2030. I'm just not sure that the UN has as much influence over this as they'd like to think they have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think either necessarily has as much influence as some people have, but then also on the other hand, I think they also they have more influence than some people think they have. And I think that's the nature of these like shadowy, puppet masters from above. It's never to the extent of the crazy, kooky Alex Jones types where it's like they literally are controlling every tiny little absolute thing. Not everything conspiracy, but they are manipulating to some extent. So it's not. So it's usually somewhere in between. I mean, obviously, the big joke these days is how much Alex Jones is right. So who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe every little thing is control. But I do think, especially that's kind of a thing that we learn within libertarianism, that it's kind of hard to centrally control. So it's not as easy. I mean, that's kind of how this fascism thing works, though, with that we've got going on in the United States, where essentially fascism is the melding of the corporate and the state. And it's essentially the corporations become part of the state. Like that's essentially what a corporation is, a wing. So you create this hierarchical system of companies within the state. So, it's kind of them naturally forming to where they can control things. But anyways, I'm more getting at that. I think they kind of all point towards the same thing. I don't think the future is going to be necessarily the fourth industrial revolution or necessarily Agenda 2030. We were kind of like speculating. I think it'll be something along those lines. So, because I know the thing with Agenda 2030 is that it's going to have like smart cities essentially, and that it's the whole idea of that, like, everyone's probably heard, that, oh, you won't own anything and you'll be happy. Like that's the line from the one article. And, essentially the idea is that we're just going to have these crazy, technocratic smart cities with, stuff like that, which I mean, obviously I think that's very much hyping the ability of what they're going to be able to do. But I think there's something there. I would not be the least bit surprised if in the future we end up having these crazy hubs of where the state has their power, these cities, if you will. Because I don't think, especially with like fourth industrial revolution, they're going to be able to control it to the extent they want to. But I do think they're going to control it more than we want them to as well. So it's a mixed bag.
Well, the one thing what libertarians have going for them, and what we know from reading Mises, from reading Hayek, reading Rothbard, there's a knowledge problem here. There's a knowledge problem that these guys in their hubris aren't taking into consideration. And so that knowledge problem, that the human action that's going to take place, that if you look back in history, I was actually, one of the books I've read here recently, I would suggest anybody read, is written by Derek Bros, and it's called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. And he starts off and he's writing about all the new technologies that are coming in, but then he ends it with a Konkin book, counter economics book that hadn't been released yet. And it's like the first 6 chapters of a Konkin book. And what Konkin's really focused on is how the gray and black markets were utilized under Pol Pot in the Soviet Union and in these places, and how they helped take down, with the gray and black markets, they took down these dictators because they were choking off the resources that these dictators claim to have a monopoly over. So it's very important that we do acknowledge there is a knowledge problem that they can't figure out.
Yeah, no, that's like, I think there is something to the idea that a lot of people, I feel like we fall prey within our libertarian movement of being binary thinkers, where it's always like, the government's either this crazy maniacal, thing that's going to Waco everybody, or Ruby Ridge your ass if you try to break away or whatever, or on the other end, they act like it's completely ineffectual, completely incompetent. And it's somewhere in between. And yeah, there is a knowledge problem. I was talking to somebody earlier, and we were kind of talking about the Agenda 2030 thing, and like, to kind of make a point of your knowledge problem thing, is the thing I said is that I think in the future it's going to be, you're going to have these people in these smart cities that are going to be all, feeling like they're going to be indignant about them being the civilized ones and the people living outside in the country, they're the dumb hicks. But there will come a point where they realize, like, oh fuck. And at that point, it's too late. It's kind of like the whole, they're almost like in gulags voluntarily until they realize, oh shit. And I think that's the kind of what we're being lulled into. And that's kind of what fascism is, because like fascism is so, in some ways, efficient until it's not, and then you're like, oh god damn it. So I don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. I heard Vin Armani talking about this. I think it was on Liberty to Lockdown when he was talking about this. It might have been on Lions of Liberty. Excuse me. But he was talking about how you're going to have the breeders who are going to basically be the savages from A Brave New World, right? And then you're going to have the technocrats, the transhumanists that are going to be coming in, and they're going to use AI to experience motherhood or fatherhood or whatever it is. And so eventually the breeders are going to win. It's not that the AI is going to kill off everybody. Eventually the breeders will win. But how hard, how devastating it gets, and how do they use their influence and power against us until then, there's no telling.
Yeah, I guess we can go ahead and start getting. We kind of defined what we're talking about loosely. This like technocratic crazy shit. So I guess we can kind of start getting into solutions / and I don't even think solutions is the right word. Maybe alleviations might be the right word, because like I said, I think and this is one thing I love about Konkin, and he's kind of taught me to think differently. Is I think we need to stop being in this binary thought. Everybody. That's why I did an episode with Clint from Lulu Lockdown recently on the clear pill, which was a Molbug thing, which is the idea was realism. Mm-hmm. And because everybody's all about these white pill, black pill, and it's like, it's so ironic that it's like, once again, we fall into this fucking stupid ass binary thinking that us libertarians always do. It's like, is this an NAP violation? Is it not? It's like, yeah, there's something there, but there's like, for example, with corporations, like, is it the state? Is it not? Sort of not. It's a gray area. Like, and that's the great thing about Konkin. You have the gray, but yeah, the point I'm getting at with like the clear pill is I do think going forward, it's more about what you do to prepare like for what's going forward. It's simply preparation, and you got to be thinking generationally, which is the thing John Bush talks a lot about. It's like you got to think generationally, and I think the big thing right now, and I don't know if you'll agree, is to essentially get the fuck out of the cities and probably also the blue states. Like, and I know that everyone's been saying that, but I do think, and I know it's not easy for everyone. Like I said, it's a generational thing, so I don't think it'll necessarily, I mean, it might happen within the next decade. I don't know. But I think going forward, the state is a dying beast. And this is something I got from Konkin. You know, I kind of got a mix of things. And he kind of talked about as the state died, it would almost like kind of recede into bubbles, essentially like smaller and smaller bubbles. But within those ones, they stamp their power down harder. And if you're a binary thinker, you're going to think like, oh my God, look at this horrible state over here. It's so authoritarian. But it's like, yeah, but it's way smaller than it was. It's pushing its power on a much smaller area. So if you're outside of that area, you know, I mean, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, we need to help those people out. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, we've been ranting and raving for forever. At some points, like, you got to, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, there are things you can do to alleviate it. My point being is I think going forward, that's the move, is to, and also become more financially independent. Because, like, I do think with the stimmies and stuff that what the government is doing is trying to make us dependent on it. And also, if you're in the areas in which it has power, I think you're going to be fucked. And your kin is going to be fucked as well. Because that's the big thing is, I mean, Larkin Rose goes into a lot about how the state is essentially like a religion. And, you know, how do religions usually work? If you're born in the Middle East, you're going to be Muslim. Most likely, like almost certainly, you're going to be Muslim because you were born in a Muslim country. And the same thing is true if you're born in one of these city states or whatever. And I think that has a big part to do with it. I'm kind of ranting now, so I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, you're fine. Yeah, no, you're right. And I saw this coming years ago. I moved my wife out of Houston, and we moved out onto 9 acres with a half-acre pond that's stocked with fish. We started planting our own food. We have chickens. We're doing our own thing. And even though I'm gone, it's hard because I'm gone all week long. So I have a lot of work to do when I get home every weekend, but I saw it coming. I saw it coming down the pike, you know, and I was like, nah, I don't want to be around here. And so now I have a piece of property that if my kids who live in Houston still want to leave, they got a place to go. If my parents who live in just north of Houston want to leave, there's a place to go, you know, and you're absolutely right. The thing is, I feel like you're being corralled into cities through resources. And so they're moving all the resources and they're centralizing all the resources to centralize all the people. And I'm like, you know what? I don't need all that. I can get out of there. I can go do my own thing. And John Bush is great. I was just watching today the D3 summit he did. And just fantastic. I'm going to have him on here in the next few days and be chatting with him. I love John Bush. I had him on last year too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you probably know about his Freedom Cells thing too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that is I mean, I kind of tried to do something sort of similar not too long ago. I mean, it didn't end up obviously having the success he did, but I do think shit like that's the way forward. And it doesn't he even says himself, he doesn't necessarily have to be Freedom Cells. It's as simple as, I mean, if anything, he just more made the concept more catchy. It's as simple as just having people locally that you can depend on. I mean, they don't even have to be fucking libertarians or full on agorists or whatever, because it's like, I don't remember who it was. God, it's a guy who does like the schooling thing. He kind of talks about how, like, you know, you look at things like Uber and like people may not necessarily like philosophically be like, oh yeah, like look at these shitty like taxi unions who blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, you get them to buy into it. It's the same thing with Konkin, where he goes out there are drug dealers and stuff that aren't philosophically on board, but they are already doing it. So I think there's something there to, you know, yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought, but
no, that's all right. You know, here's a little white pill. Like, I mean, we're talking pill. Like, here's a white pill. I live in a town of 2,000 people. City Hall is closed, has never been open. We don't have a police department. Like, the county police come around every once in a while. The state police coming around every once in a while. The way we fund everything in this town is we have a crawfish boil and a fair every year, and they raise money, and that money goes to funding the bridge and yada yada yada. We have one bridge, yes, it, you know, keeps the stoplight going, and one stoplight. But there are these havens in America where you can go and you can live basically a voluntarist lifestyle, and nobody's fucking with you. You know, I feel ashamed telling people this. I live on 8 3/4 acres with a half-acre pond stocked with fish. I have a barn. I have a 5-bedroom house. It cost me $177,000. These places are there. You can find these places. Is the climate perfect? Am I living in San Diego? No. But you know what? I'm happy. I'm perfectly fine. I'm acclimated to the weather. I mean, I'm from Louisiana originally, so the humidity and the heat, I don't fucking bother me none. Now, my South African wife, she can't stand the humidity. Not at all. She's like, I don't know what the hell this shit is. Get it off of me. Like, whatever. I don't want anything to do with it. But you can find these havens. You can find places to go.
And even if like, the other thing, I know a lot of people are like, oh, I can't get out, I can't whatever, I'm stuck in this mortgage, whatever, what have you. And I completely sympathize. Like, a lot of people know or listening, like, I'm still currently active duty military, so I am in no spot. I'm literally dependent on the government. Like, right now, I'm telling you right now, that's actually that's a big thing I've said multiple times. I would like to say I'm some hero and philosophically like on the up and up, and that's why I'm getting on the military. That's part of it. But I see the writing on the wall, and I don't want to be dependent on the government. That's one of the biggest things. So it's kind of fucking selfish. So, like, and I mean, I have a hard time getting my wife to buy this because she's a little bit more of a normie. But I don't think, like, I still have, if I wanted to retire, I still have 9 years left, and I don't know if I have that kind of time to where before shit starts getting wonky. And, like, right. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really willing to make that risk. And I also, even then, once I get out, do I want to be dependent on a pension? I don't, like, cause who knows? They're going to pull it away when I do some, thing they don't want them to do. But I kind of want to throw something at you. Have you ever read Against the Grain by James C. Scott?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I highly suggest you read it. You obviously have a lot of time on your hands. It's a great audiobook. James C. Scott is, I want to say he's like more of like a left anarchist, but I don't remember. But he's like an anarchist historian, and his big thing, like in that book, is he kind of goes over the creation of the first states, and the first states were created around agriculture. And one of the big theses of that book was how the people who were in those like first states, because like the way it works is the agriculture started, and the state formed around the agriculture and kind of leached off the agriculture, because agriculture kind of like lends itself to being a centralized, fertile area that, But anyways, what he got at in that book was that there were people who lived outside the state in the less fertile areas that you would think, for all intents and purposes, would be like, not the place to be. But those people actually seem to, from all, historical records and stuff, actually thrive. But we don't really know much about them because history refers to them as savages, tribal fucking, whatever. And it doesn't really tell their story either. And I think history rhymes. And I think there's something to that, I can see a straight parallel between a fertile agricultural area and a, crazy techno state, like techno cities or whatever the hell, and the people living on the outsides. And I think there's something there. Obviously, I'm not saying there's going to be perfect anarchy on the outskirts. Even then, they had tribal societies. They weren't perfect anarchists. So I think that's kind of what we're probably looking at going forward. Is it's going to be, I actually not even entirely sure if we're going to get to a point where we have secession and shit like that. Maybe a few states here and there. But I think we're going to get to a point where the country areas are going to essentially be a soft nullification, where they don't really necessarily be like, we nullify this, but they're kind of not doing it, and I mean, that's kind of why I'm pushing for agorism big time, because I do think, one of the great things about agorism is completely disregards the state, to where it's like, and I think, as I mentioned Ark and Rose earlier, all the state is people believing the illusion of authority. And if we can dispel that illusion of authority, then you end up with situations where you have these areas where, yeah, there's sort of a state, but does it do anything? Not really, because no one really thinks anything of it, So, yeah. I mean, there might be a state in name, but, because I think a lot of us have this idea of the state just being abolished and gone. And I don't think that's how it necessarily works,
Yeah, well, all right. Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. My great grandparents were on the Trail of Tears. Okay. And on the Trail of Tears, they were pushed out of Tennessee into Oklahoma. From Oklahoma, they were put on a reservation. They didn't like it. They were like, no. So what did they do? Is they disappeared into the wilderness. And then they popped back up years later in Mississippi. Don't know what the hell they were doing in that time. I can't trace it down. None of my family can trace it. We don't know what the fuck was going on. We just know they lived in the wilderness and then they popped back up in Mississippi. Like, don't know nothing about it. That's what you're going to have. You're going to have these groups of people that just kind of disappear and just go off into their own little thing. And it doesn't matter if the state comes in. We talk about the state like it's a monolith. That's one thing about libertarians that drives me crazy, because the state's made up of a bunch of fucking people. Like, there's a lot of people with a lot of different incentives to do different things. But they can come in and they can claim eminent domain. They can do all these different things, take property, but it's not going to stop you from living. You just have to decide how you were willing to fight it. And this is kind of, and I think you and I are going to actually have this conversation next week with why libertarians. But this is kind of why I say that the agorist and libertarian argument is so nonsensical, because like you said, that you're looking at it as a binary. You don't know. I could build a farm like Jack Spirko. I could build this just amazing plantation and show you how to live free, and that could work for you. But you could have Dave Smith running for president, who becomes like the next Ron Paul style messenger, and he changes a bunch of people's minds. So I don't think there's one right way. I think there's a lot of different ways that people are brought to liberty. The ultimately, what you have to focus on is you have responsibilities. Whatever those responsibilities are, you have to take care of. If you don't take care of your responsibilities, you're not even in a position to help somebody else, and then you got to find people that want to be helped. You know what I'm saying? It's just like state addiction is no different than drug addiction in my estimation. These people have to want to be free of the state before you can actually convince them to be free of the state.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of brought up something I want to touch on a little bit. I feel like I get thrown in my face so much, especially being as I'm more of like the agorist vein and stuff. The concept of like, oh, well, you're just going to go run off and be an individual and do this and do that. It's like, to some extent, yes. I mean, I feel like I'm not one of those people who is like immediately frowns on any sort of collective anything. I know there are a lot of like smooth brain libertarians that like, be like, oh, fucking collectivism. And it's like, well, people can work together. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, if you're talking about some sort of Borg brain bullshit, then yes, like not cool. But like at the end of the day, though, I think it is like you have to start at the individual first. Like you need to get your shit together. And to some extent, I think that kind of gets other people's shit together, because it's not like let's say with my life, I've told people, like I've already brought it up, that I'm in the active duty military or whatever. My life is not I don't exist in a vacuum. So as I'm trying to adjust my life, other people are going to see what I'm trying to do, and that's going to have effects. So like they're like, oh my God, you're acting as you only care about yourself. And it's like, to some extent, yes, I'm very stern or asking that way. At the end of the day, it's like I'm concerned about me and my own. Like everyone else be damned. I mean, I'll do what I can, but if it comes between me and my family or anything else in the fucking world, it's me and my family. Sorry, you can all eat a dick. It is what it is.
Dude, I have 5 kids and a granddaughter, and all of y'all could fucking die in the worst genocide ever, as long as they're okay. Oh my God, I'm sorry, guys. It's just the way it is, man. I'm sorry. I remember getting into a conversation with a libertarian, and this is when I stopped calling myself a libertarian. This was early 2019. This conversation took place. I'll never forget this conversation, because I was like, you people are cancer. People like you are fucking cancer, and I don't want anything to do with you. And we're talking about where to find anarchy in the world. And I'm like, well, look at Chiron. And I posted an article, and he goes, sounds like communism. I'm like, it's voluntary. Sounds like communism. Oh, you've never read Peter Kropotkin, have you? Sounds like communism. I don't give a fuck what it sounds like. They have voluntarily agreed to live this way. And now here it is, 8, 9, 10 years later, and they're starting to usher in some capitalist, ideals into their society. But they had to get rid of the bad element, and they had to find a tribal way that would work for them. I'm not going to stand up against the CIA. You're not going to stand up against the CIA. None of these libertarians are going to stand up against the CIA. But together as a tribe, we might have a chance to at least back them off and get them off our fucking asses, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing I don't like about libertarians, because they're like, well, that sounds collectivist. I'm like, well, not all the mutualists are wrong. Not all of them are wrong. There's something to be said. There's strength in numbers. The Doors had a song, 5 to 1. I don't know. You know the song?
No, I've never heard that song, but no,
he says 5 to 1, 1 in 5. No one here gets out alive. Mm-hmm. You take yours, I'll take mine. Come together if we try. But another thing he says in that song is they got the guns, but we got the numbers, And at some point, those numbers actually make a difference. There was a reason the Bolsheviks actually fucking succeeded.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I do get super irritated with that. That's the one of the things that blows. Like, I feel like that it's like lower level thinking, to where like, I don't know, maybe it's just like someone who's like green and is like still early in their like development and like philosophy there, because it is like that does drive me up the wall when people be like, well, that's collectivist. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like, is it voluntary? Like, I don't care if it's communism, if it's socialism. Is it like, did they voluntarily be like, this is what I want to do? Is that yes? Okay, cool. Who gives a shit? That's really
it's like, okay, so you want to be an atomistic individual living out in the wilderness like Ted Kaczynski with no like ground in reality? Like, that's what you want? Is that really what you want with your life? Because that's what you're advocating. You're not advocating for liberty on any like massive scale. What you're advocating for is you being a fucking hermit. Well, you go be a fucking hermit then, because the way that the market works is you have to deal with other fucking people. You have to provide value to other fucking people. So how are we going to create our lives in such a way where we're providing value for other fucking people? Yeah. And if you don't, you're ignoring like lessons of Rothbard, of Mises, and all that. If you're ignoring the fact that the market has to be, in order to engage in the market, you have to provide value. Like you can't be both.
Yeah. The ironic thing too is those same people who will say that like individualist, collective, binary bullshit are the same ones that when you like make arguments of like securing your own freedom will be like, oh, well, you're just going to get Waco'd by the state. And you're like, well, no one is saying that, like, it's like that, like, I don't know if you read Stirner, but his whole thing was, I like his concept of a union of egoists. And the idea is that like, it's individualists working collectively together. And it's like, right. Yes, as long as you don't lose your individualism in the process, who cares? Like, I mean, and even then, even if you do want to lose your individualism, I mean, I wouldn't suggest it, but like, as long as it's voluntary, whatever, like, I mean, that's not for me, dog, but if that's your thing, whatever, right. If you want to exist in lockstep with other people, as long as you're doing it voluntarily, I don't care. But I don't know. Yeah, it's just, I find that ironic.
Then there's the fact that autists cannot discern sarcasm at all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I can say that I have 4 fuck trophies and 1 severely autistic participation trophy. And he just like, if I get sarcastic with him, he's like, what? Like, wait, are you mad at me? No, dude, like, calm down.
I love that you use that term. I'm like, I've only ever heard one other person use that term. I use fuck trophies all the time, and people it's funny. Like, it's a good way to tell what kind of person you're dealing with. Because if you call your kid a fuck trophy, like, some people will be like, oh, and you're like, fuck that guy. Like, that's not someone I want to hang out with. Right. Like, it doesn't mean I don't love my children. It's a fucking joke.
Yeah. Well, and my eldest son is extremely autistic, and he gets a kick out of it every time I call him an extremely autistic participation trophy. He just thinks that's the fucking funniest thing.
Yeah. All right, let's shift to. We're kind of already sort of like jumping around. I mean, but whatever. I like this template; it works. But I kind of want to touch on the Boog. Like, what are your thoughts on the Boog? We talked about a little bit because I had a discussion. I wasn't even going to mention it in today's episode, but I do think because a lot of people see the Boog as like and I think this is a function of us seeing the nation in a nationalistic sense of like we need to save the whole nation. Where I don't really care about the whole nation. I care about, making sure we can find areas of freedom and move as many people there as we possibly can. But anyways, what do you think the Boog could be a positive thing? I mean, the Boog's kind of a squirrely term. Are we talking revolution? Are we talking collective defense? Like, I mean, I normally think of it as 1776.2, and I think that's how most people see it. But so what are your thoughts?
I think if you're attempting to use violence against institution that it conceives itself as having a monopoly on violence, you're playing by their rules.
Yep. And
we should never play by their rules. Yep. I don't. If it's a Waco situation and you're defending yourself, like I'm David Thibodeau is a really good friend of mine. I love that guy to death. Like, I would never talk bad about him. I know Magnus. I've spoken to him. I've had him on the podcast, Magnus Panvidia. I love him. I love his personality. I love the way he comes across. But I think what people are missing is the Boogaloo Boys aren't trying to institute the Boog. What they're saying is the government has already brought it to our doorstep. The critical race theorists have brought it to our doorstep. We don't have a choice. All right. But the fact of the matter is, if I don't see the threat right there in front of me, committing violence on me or my family, people I love, I mean, I would put Scott Horton, Pete into this category. I would defend them with my life. I love these guys. I've known them for 3-4 years now. And like, we're friends, you know? If I don't see that happening in being initiated, then I'm not interested in using force. Now, communists will tell you, and I had one just tell me this the other day. That's how I know they'll tell you this, is that, well, any ideology that is so passive will never succeed. And I'm like, well, it's not about being passive. It's about being smart. It's about, actually making the greatest effect possible. So I don't think meeting the state with violence is the best way to handle it. But if you have a situation like we saw in Houston a couple of years ago, where the state's kicking in your door, you have a Breonna Taylor situation where the state's kicking in your door, and you utilize violence to defend yourself, I'm not going to say that you did anything wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just going to give you extra points for every Fed you take down. I mean, I'm like, I feel like when I tell people I'm like anti-Boog, people are like, think I'm some like foofy fag, where I'm like, oh, don't. No, I'm like, for example, like the case, the thing I always use as an example, and it's funny, I can tell like what kind of person I'm dealing with, like when I bring up this example. There was not too long ago, maybe like within the year, there was some guy who got pulled over. I don't know the exact details, but he got pulled over by the cops, and he wasn't doing really anything wrong, from what I recall. And the cops were trying to get him to get out of his car, and he's like, I don't want to get out of my car. I just want to go home. Please leave me alone. Wasn't doing anything wrong. Apparently, like, come to find out later, he had like, I think he had like drugs on him or something minor. And then they tased him multiple times, tried to yank him out of the car, essentially assaulted him over and over and over again. And then he finally, got out of his car and then blew them both away, killed them. I think that is morally entirely 100% in the right, but it was retarded.
Both things can be true.
Yeah, like that's like, and that's the same thing with the Boog. It's like, I can agree. I mean, it depends on motivation. So if you're just trying to institute a new government, I think that's stupid. I mean, obviously, I'm an anarchist. I think you're gonna create a whole lot of bloodshed for maybe a marginal improvement. Most likely, it's gonna be worse. Like, I mean, that's how most revolutions work. But I mean, now if you're just doing it in a defensive manner, unless you have the numbers, or okay, if you're gonna do an offensive manner, I know a lot of people get like, and that's kind of where I get the moral thing. It's kind of like, technically speaking, the state by its existence is infringing on you. So you can kind of make the case that, it's not offensive, it's defensive. But people get what you're saying when you're saying offensive or defensive in relation to the state. If you're making an offensive against the state, maybe I can somehow figure out a way to where it's morally okay, but it's tactically insane. Tactically going to screw yourself over. I mean, maybe I can think of a scenario in which it isn't, but I mean, and even then, within a defensive violence situation with the state, most likely it's stupid as well, depending on the scenario. I mean, it really depends on like what kind of people you got, because if you got enough people, it is what it is, and usually then there just won't be violence, period, because they'll be like, shit, I don't want none, which is kind of the beauty of freedom cells. That's one thing he's talking about. When they get bigger, like, they'll start showing up when the cops start fucking with people and be like, and I think that's just going to deter violence,
Yeah. Well, so. And that's one of the things that we've seen. There's a group that meets in Dallas every year. I never can remember the name of their group, but shout out to Kelsey Cabled. I can't never say his name right. He's part of the group. He actually does the videography for him, and they feed the homeless. Well, in Dallas, it's illegal to feed the homeless without a permit. So what they do is they all show up with guns. And they're like, all right. And this past year, they showed up to the state building with a guillotine and left it on the steps of the courthouse or whatever. Like, and I'm all for it. I'm like, all right, yeah, y'all do this thing. You're not actually like initiating violence. You're actually not, doing anything. You're just like saying, hey man, we're not going to put up with your shit. But was it Konkin? Like, I get so many of these philosophers confused. Was it Konkin that said, no violent revolution has ever ended with more freedom. It's always another tyrannical government that's fighting to take control of a tyrannical government. Like, so if somebody is looking at being violent, I'm already suspicious of them, because I'm like, I don't know if I want your violence. I don't know if your violence is any better than the violence we're already dealing with.
Yeah. And the thing is too, I feel like even if somehow you magically had some like pure movement of like, whether it's defensive or offensive violence against the state, and you're like, we are simply just trying to, defend ourselves, I think almost certainly it's still going to get co-opted, if it's some sort of like larger movement, because it's like, and then some other institution will take its place, in that sense. Because I just think that's how it works, like, I don't know. But yeah, I think we beat this horse to shit. So
I think what you're saying is it's always a bourgeoisie that has sympathies to the revolutionaries that leads the movement. It's never going to lead to a bottom up. And then you look at, and we can move right back into the fourth industrial revolution with this, if that's where you want to go with it. But then you look at it, and these guys are already talking about how to use bottom up tyranny, man. I mean, what do you think a Twitter mob is? That's bottom up tyranny. These they've already figured it out. The thing about the sophisticates, and this is something I've been talking to my man Coop about on my show. We've done 3 parts on this. And the thing about the sophisticates are they have the money and the leisure time to sit around and contemplate the things that you and I don't have the leisure to sit around and think about. Right. So when you look at Prague Kana writes an article about disassembling empires through devolution, and you get through that article, you realize, what this guy is saying is that utilizing Brexit and these decentralized movements in order to empower the corporate structure. And it's all about keeping the politicians in their pockets. So they've already figured out, they're already contemplating, if you do decentralize, if you do secede, if you do nullify the system, how do we infiltrate that group of people? They're already thinking that. They're already writing about it. They're already talking about it. You're not new, man. You're not coming up with a new strategy here. These guys are already thinking about it. Again, they do have a knowledge problem. They don't know how you're going to act tomorrow. They don't know everything. They're not God. They don't see all. They're not omnipotent, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But they are strategizing on how to control the masses.
Yeah, no, it's almost a scramble. And I think a good example of kind of what you were touching on there is like crypto. It's the same idea that's a big thing. There's so many movements of them trying to essentially centralize this decentralized things in certain areas, and they're co-opting it. And I think, I'm not someone who knows a ton about crypto, but I do know that's a thing. There are avenues you can go where it's more decentralized, less government involved, and then there's also the vice versa. So I know a lot of people have this like, they look at things like crypto and they go, oh my God, here's the thing that's going to end the state. And it's like, it's a good tool to do that, but on the other end, it's also going to empower the state. So that's kind of goes into what I was talking about earlier with the clear pill. It's kind of like, it's a little, you got to kind of move the way you want to go. If you control your future, if you move that way and, you encourage other people to move a certain way, it'll, I think it's going to be pockets. There are going to be pockets that are going to be, kind of, moving into that government control, and pockets that aren't. And that's, crypto is a great example of that.
Right. Yeah. There's a whole chapter in shaping the future of the fourth industrial revolution on crypto, on how to centralize crypto. You can go look right now. There's a digitaldollar.org. They're already trying to figure out how to turn the US dollar into a digital currency. Like China's already been experimenting with this. This is something that's going on. Venezuela experimented with it, a couple of years ago. So when they hit hyperinflation, they were trying to figure out, all right, how do we bring this innovation, this new cryptocurrency in and stabilize our markets. So they're already the central planners are already trying to figure this stuff out. They're already trying to get ahead of you, right? What you can't do is rest on your morals. You have to understand that no matter what these people do, you're going to have to take care of your own. You are ultimately responsible for yourself. Like, the fact of the matter is, I mean, I may not like you. You may not like me. I may not like Pete. I may not like Scott. Like, we don't have to live together. We don't have to be in the same community. It's just at this point in time, we have the same enemy. So we have to look at it in a very strategic method, because that's how they're looking at it. They believe that this divide and conquer strategy that they are using, that they're flooding down upon us, to where they're having banks turn in their customers for spending money in DC on January 6th. They're turning in their customers. Like, they're utilizing all these systems against us already. It's happening. There's nothing you can do about it. The best thing, like what I did whenever I found out about this, I said, fuck this. I'm opening an account with a credit union. And you know what? I'm limited at the things I can fucking do because I utilize a credit union. But I'm also a little bit safer in my individuality, in my autonomy, because I have more control over my money. I have a little bit, more say in who sees my transactions.
You kind of touch on something that I think I kind of want to make a point. You said how they use divide and conquer. Yep. And I think the thing is that what we need to do is to use that against them. Allow them to divide, but not allow them to conquer. Allow them to maybe have half, essentially. Like, this is kind of something I learned from martial arts. Like, I did wrestling a lot in high school. I've done jiu-jitsu and stuff. If you're dealing with a stronger enemy, or just an enemy in general, one great thing, especially with a stronger enemy, is to allow them to use their strength against them. Right. You use that momentum. So that's the thing. They're trying to do divide and conquer. It's been something. It's a tale as old as time. But at some point, we got to rise above, and we got to fucking use that against them. And that will be, they're dividing and conquer. Find your areas and put your flag on the ground. Start stamping down areas of more freedom, and that's going to be the rural areas and probably red states. I don't know. I mean, with a red-blue game, it always can switch, but that's what it's looking like right now. Because but whatever. Rural versus city is the big divide, in my opinion, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent. I think there's something to be said about the red pill, blue pill, and the way that people process information. I'm not sure if I went around my town, my small town, and I asked them about any details about what's going on, any of them would have any idea of what is happening. Maybe a couple. And it's not because they're stupid. It's just because they don't care. They're just not interested. The thing of the matter is, you have to be at some point. Richard Grove was telling me this earlier, and I was like, this is a beautiful point. In order to fight back against the enemy, you have to know something about an enemy. So I come across, and maybe it's the way I deliver the message, maybe it's the way I talk about it, I come across as black pilled, but I'm not. The most black pilling part of the whole situation is not more people are talking about it, but the fact of the matter is, somebody has to get it off the ground and get it in the ether so that people are talking about it. So maybe, between me and a couple of other guys that I'm hearing talk ESG and the Great Reset and this, that, and the other, you're getting that education, that information that you need, because my whole thing is, I don't know how you should act. I just tell you to act accordingly. You know, like that's my thing. I don't have details on how you should conduct your life. I know what I'm doing. I know how I'm conducting my life. I know the people I'm looking to tell me the best way to move forward with things, you know? And I have specific questions and I ask people that are knowledgeable about that specific area that could help me. And then I take each of those areas and I'm like, okay, so this is how I can utilize all these different areas in my own life to create what I want my future to look like. And just as an example, the other day I messaged Pete. I was like, who do you know that's best on blockchain technology? And he's like, here, email Vin. And I was like, all right. So I emailed Vin Armani. And so I'm like, hey, look, my question is, I ran into this Oro Pocket. I think it was oropocket.net. I was like, I ran into this website. Looks pretty interesting. I can buy cryptocurrency and they send me a card and I can use their card to purchase things with cryptocurrency or with gold, whatever I decide. But they're on this network I've never heard of before. What do you think? So Vin comes back, and this is not advice. I'm not giving you financial advice. I'm a dumbass truck driver. So like, don't take any financial advice from me. But Vin tells me, he's like, hey, I've been using Uphold for years. Uphold allows you to do the same thing, and they're on the blockchain. I've been using them for years. It's the way that I do all my business in cryptocurrency. I'm like, okay, so let me check out Uphold. You know, so I go look into and research Uphold. So like, that's what you have to do. You have to start looking for these alternatives, and as your quest moves you forward, you're trying to find solutions to your problem. Now, the problem with Uphold, I'll tell you straight up, what logo do they use on their card? And here's the problem. You're going to run into, if you get a card from one of these people, it's going to have a MasterCard logo. It's going to have a Visa logo. Well, MasterCard has already said that, put up a carbon calculator on their site so that their customers can come through and calculate their carbon. So how long is it before Uphold shuts me down because I refuse to go by like whatever, adherence that they are saying that I must go by? You know, so there's this a strategy of moving, and I'm moving around, and I just have to try to be quicker than they are. When they're trying to nail me in a corner, I got to be slick enough. You know, I got to be Barry Sanders, you know, and like spin out of it and get down the field and get in the end zone, because I can't be stuck in a position. I can't paint myself in a corner.
Yeah, I want to touch on, you kind of brought up something there we kind of breezed over earlier, the ESG shit, because I think that the first time I heard about that was, I think, on your episode with Pete. And I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all. But at the same time, I do think that's something we need to be aware of, because there's something very fucking freaky about that. And it's already in place, I believe, to some extent, correct? Right? Okay,
so yes, there's a task force that's put forward. Now, the first time I read about this was Klaus Schwab wrote an article for Time Magazine, and he mentioned ESG, and I was like, I don't know it. I don't know what that acronym stands for. I'm not going to concern myself with it. I was more interested because he was breaking down what is the Great Reset, you know? So I was like, I'm more interested in the big subject here, the macro. But then I ran across Glenn Beck had done an episode, and he's done 2 episodes on ESG, I believe, that you can find. And it's Glenn Beck. I mean, you're going to get some good information out of it. You're going to get some bad information out of it. But at the same time, I'm like, what is he talking about? Because he's not spazzing over nothing. You know, I mean, Like the first time I ever heard of Operation Chokepoint was from Glenn Beck, so it's like, all right, what is this? So I start looking into it. I'm trying to figure out what ESG is, and come to find out it stands for environmental, social justice, corporate governance. All right. So what they're doing is they took the model from China of the social credit score, and they're like, how do we apply this to our politic? All right. So the U.S. politic, obviously, what runs U.S. politic is the climate change and social justice. And period. I mean, end of sentence. That's where we've been going for many years now. So what they're doing is they're assigning a score value to investors, corporations, and banking institutions. Now, where it gets kind of freaky and it gets into your life is if you have a 401k, you are an investor. So Merrill Edge, who's in a subsidiary of Merrill Lynch and Bank of America, has already added ESG scores to the dashboard of their 401k subscribers. So if you have a 401k through Merrill Edge, you can go to your dashboard. You'll see you have an ESG score. They've already put it in there. And so what this is saying is that if you don't meet these requirements, they're going to start marking down your score, right? So if you work for a company that's not diverse enough, let's say you buy ammunition, or you do this or you do that, you do anything that's not approved, then the bank is going to turn you in, or the investors or the investment firm turns you in, and your score gets marked down. As your score gets marked down, then you're not qualified for home loans, car loans, yada, 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 yada. My old question is, where does this stop? Where does it stop? What avenue of our lives does it stop with? And it also has a part, and I don't have the Morgan Stanley. I'll send you the links whatever links you want on all this stuff. But Morgan Stanley laid out a model, and under social justice, they have health. It's not disclosure. It's something else. It's health and something. So basically what they're saying is, under social justice, in order to be socially just, there's health disclosures that have to be, taken into consideration. So you look at the vaccine passport information that's come out the last few months. Well, that goes under social justice. Well, how does that make any sense? Well, think about last year. Does anybody remember Camille Foster being on Bill Maher's show? Whenever they were telling him, well, most of the people that are coming down with COVID, the people that are most susceptible to COVID are minorities, are Black. Well, okay, now, so you don't get a vaccine passport, you don't get the vaccine. Now suddenly you're a racist or you're a bigot. I posted a story the other day where they were saying that women are, are more susceptible to COVID than men now. Like they're taking it to its extreme, the logical conclusion of what they think.
The irony of the Black thing too is that it's the vitamin D thing is the big reason why.
Right.
Like the irony is that they're using one of the greatest weaknesses of the COVID narrative as a strength.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, like I said, these sophists have nothing better to do than to think about how to turn facts against you and weaponize the information that's out there.
No, yeah, that's I don't know, it's creepy, and that's the whole reason. This is the flaw with the fascism system we have going on. Because the thing is, people see, like, they're like, oh, well, fucking Amazon's awesome, and like I love Google and this and that. Right. It's like, and they don't really see it until it's like, oh, well, now, hey, do you want this tax break? Do you not want this tax break? And then, slowly but surely, the fucking government, I mean, it does this, shit like this, and I don't know. Yeah, that's why this shit's so fucking creepy. And it is funny trying to convince people like, hey, we're in fascism. Like, yeah, but this is like Amazon comes in a day, but like what happens when they start fucking regulating it and do weird wonky shit? And it's like you see this year where they started cranking down like crazy and it's starting to become very apparent for everybody. But it's kind of like we already got to a point to where it's like they're already so pervasive. So it's like, I mean, I think at the same time, I'm kind of glad they cranked down super hard this year because I think it opened a lot of eyes. But at the same time, it's kind of like they've already kind of got they're already balls deep in a lot of ways, you know.
I think most of the frogs that were going to jump out of the pot jumped out of the pot before 2020. I honestly believe that.
Yeah, sort of. I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I've known like pretty much every conservative that I know, I will talk to, and they kind of almost damn near agree with me in everything now. But yet they're not like entirely on board. They're almost like purple pilled, if you will. Like I don't know, like, but they're not willing to go that extra step. So
they don't like logical conclusions.
Yeah. I think we're at a good point to go ahead and kill it. We've been going for a while. And I mean, I was going to touch more on the political, but we'll save that for our talk on why libertarian. So that should be fun because I'm interested in that because we got me. It's supposed to be Sal, me, you, and Clean Libertarian. Which I mean, I don't know. You and Clean kind of take the like both type perspective. I've utilized both. Me and Sal both take the like not using the political system and think it's a negative. But the thing is, the difference between me and Sal is that Sal I think takes it as like it's morally incorrect to use the political system. I don't think. I mean, I'm more Sterner asking that. I kind of like morals are kind of whatever. Like if it gets the job done. Like I know that sounds shitty, but you know, but like I have a tactical disagreement with it.
Yeah, I just don't. I just don't claim to know what is going to change people's minds. I just you know, and the more the merrier. You know?
And even then, even with me being like I admitted just now, it's a tactical thing for me.
Right.
So even within that, I kind of always try to caveat it with like I could be wrong because it's whenever you're talking about like tactical shit, it's very soft science type stuff. I don't know, but I mean, I'm not gonna blow my wad for the episode because but we'll go ahead and kill here. You want to go ahead and drop your plugs?
Yeah, we can do that. You can find me at the libertarianinstitute.org /year-0 or TommySalmons.com is my Substack. Really, I don't write as much as I'd like to because I'm a truck driver and I just don't have a whole lot of time. So, and Jesus, man, I'm recording like 3 to 4 episodes every week. And people are like, well, you're only releasing 2 a week. I'm like, yeah, because I want a week off eventually. So I'm recording a whole lot right now. But yeah, TommySalmons.com is where you can get my Substack, and libertarianinstitute.org /year-0 is where you can find me at the Libertarian Institute.
Cool.
Or at TD Salmons if you really want to follow that lame ass fucking Twitter of mine.
Cool. All right, stick around for a second after I end. We'll talk for like a second. But for my plugs, like I said at the beginning, No Way Jose YouTube channel. I'm on pretty much every audio podcast are at. I'm not on the Liberty Movement YouTube and BitChute anymore. You can the Liberty Movement's on Facebook and MeWe. If you do want to check that out, though, you can hit me up at thelibertymovementglobal@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter. That's where I'm most active as Jose Galison. Give me money too. I like that a lot. Patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. With that, I really appreciate it. It was fun. Out.